Good evening, folks. It's 20 past 10 on a dark and horrible evening, and I thought I would post this video just to share with people and to point out that it might be worthwhile if you've got your rectifier regulator in the stock position under the bike, even if you've got no intention of relocating it using the kits that I manufacture, it's probably worth checking this connector. This person bought a relocation kit from me, and pending the arrival of a new rectifier regulator from India, because they're about half the price that you can buy them for from retailers in Britain. So he thought he'd do the prep and disconnect his old rectifier. Now, he'd had problems with charging, battery dissipating its charge, just generally being a bit unreliable. And when he removed his rectifier, look at that. That is the connector, the half of the block terminal that's attached to the wiring harness of the bike. So it's pulled it up just on top of the engine there to get a good picture of it. And as you can see, it's had severe burning there. There's been a lot of heat in that. It's melted the plastic. And as you'll see in the next photo, it actually got so hot it melted the metal pin off completely. So he's had, you've got two black wires and two red wires on the output from the rectifier regulator, obviously positive and negative, and they're doubled up to increase the gauge. Basically, you're doubling up thin wires rather than having a big fat one in there. And in the case of his bike, the entire output of the regulator rectifier has been going through only one red wire because it burned the terminal off. Now, I think that the regulator aspect of the RR unit, I think that's failed. Because his charging light didn't come on or anything, but it's obviously been throwing out vast amounts of current, and the regulator aspects of things is what should be dissipating excess charge from the alternator in terms of heat through the cooling fins. So, it's stock position this was in, of course, so it's obviously got so hot where it lives that I think the regulator aspect of the RR unit has stopped working properly, and then it's fried that connector. Now, this next picture here shows that's the actual the half of the same block connector that's attached to the actual rectifier regulator unit. And if you look at that there, you'll see there's 4 pins, or there should be 2 reds and 2 blacks, and that's half of the connector is actually attached to the rectifier regulator. It's got so hot that the top right metal prong terminal has completely burned off, and it corresponds with the horrible burned hole on the corresponding half of that block connector. So it's been generating large amounts of heat, enough to melt metal, albeit thin metal, and it has heated up the wires, the wiring itself from the rectifier regulator. And as I say, I think it's because obviously the rectifier regulator's malfunctioned, being where it is in the stock position. It's got hot anyway because they're always failing, and I think the regulator aspects of it stopped, and it started to fry things. Now, that's how a block should look. So that would normally be attached to the wiring harness of the bike, and then the rectifier regulator would plug into that. So it's quite a difference between what he has got on his to what it should look like. And this next shot shows that's the end that you get on the rectifier itself. So you've got 2 red and 2 black wires come out of that. So that's actually attached to the rectifier. Now, this next photo shows he's snipped it off the rectifier to have a look at the actual wiring, the actual copper wire. Look at the state of that. So that, that's been generating a lot of heat, and it's a vicious circle really, because what happens is the heat anneals the copper gets sort of grungy, therefore it gets hot, and that anneals it even more, and it just goes round and round until something fails. In this case, it was the actual block connector melting badly, and that's the actual block connector that's attached to the wiring harness. Now, this chap, he emailed me, and I gave him my phone number and said, look, just give me a ring, you know, we'll talk it through. So these 4-pin connectors are so tricky to do. They are, I'm not saying I'm a genius and everybody else is stupid, but they are very, very, very tricky to do, extremely fiddly, even on a bench. And I said to this chap, you know, you're not going to be able to do this under the bike and attach that to your wiring harness to replace the fried one. You know, it took me at least 10 attempts when I first started making these extension kits, because it is very, very fiddly. So what I've done for him is to manufacture that. So that is if you imagine that's connected to the wiring harness of the bike. And what I've done is to pre-wire it for him, because as I say, you'd never succeed. I wouldn't succeed upside down under the bike. You know, so what I've done is to use the correct gauge wire, albeit the colours are, you know, they're not red and black. This is what I had available. And then what he can then do, he can then snip the burned version that you saw earlier, snip it off the wiring harness, and there's 20 centimetres of wire there. So, you know, he could cut wire back if it's blackened and burned to get nice fresh copper. And then, as you can see, there's the end of it again. What he can then do is to solder the 4 wires onto the wiring harness. The alternative would be really to, you know, well, there is no alternative. You've got to do it. So I've sent him some of these as well. Now, these are handy little gadgets. They're shrink, sort of heat tubing thing with a solder ring in them. And all you do is you poke your wire in either side until both of the copper ends, bared ends, go inside that solder ring. And then you just use a normal lighter, and it will not only melt the solder, but it will also shrink the tubing. So this is what I'll be sending to him. I'll put a couple of pics in at the end just to, you know, show the difference between obviously what it should look like and what it did look like. So he's now able to, with that, he's able to restore his bike back to stock, you know, stock wiring, because obviously you don't want to be snipping wires and fitting block terminals off eBay. It's just because thereafter, if you have to replace the rectifier regulator, you've got to use the same connectors, which means more cutting and soldering and so on. So it's a happy ending to this one. I'll be sending that off to him tomorrow, and as I say, I'll do a little resume now of the state of it. I think the purpose of this video really is to not to say, oh clever me, it's to say, if you've got your stock rectifier in the stock position under the bike, I think it is worthwhile checking that connector, because this is a 2023 bike, and just check that you've not got this kind of thing going on. This is the first one I've seen. Rectifier regulator failures, where people buy the extension kits from me and put a new rectifier regulator at the front of the bike, either under the oil cooler or under the steering yoke, lower steering yoke. It's usually because the charging light's coming on, you know, the red charging light. In other words, it's the rectifier side of the RR unit that's malfunctioning. This is the first time I've seen this, where, as I say, unless, correct me if I'm wrong, somebody out there might know more, I think the regulator side of the RR unit has failed, and it's just been giving stacks of current all the time until it's burned the terminal, and then vicious cycle after that. So happy ending. That's going to be going off tomorrow, and I've asked if he would send me some pictures of the job once it's done, so I can post a little update. So it might just be worthwhile having a look at your plug, because that is not an old bike. So in the meantime, everybody, take care, and I will post again soon with some pictures of a happy person in Malaysia, Peter. Hello, Peter. He's sent me some great photos of his relocation. He got a bike, an Interceptor, delivered to Malaysia, and he's just put my cable kit onto it, and he's sent me loads of pics, so I'll do a separate video for that. So in the meantime, take care, and I will post again soon. Bye for now.